Good evening and welcome to everyone joining us for this PIP Masterclass and Q&A session. My name is James Bailey. I'm the Senior Information Editor at the MS Society, and I'm really pleased that we've got one of our MS Benefits Advisors joining us today. That's Julian, and he'll be answering your questions a little bit later. But right now, we're going to go to Julian, who's going to take us through a PIP Masterclass session. So over to you, Julian.
Hi, I'm Julian, one of the MS advisors on the MS helpline. Welcome to our PIP Masterclass. Today, I'm going to share information and give examples that will help you apply for PIP and talk you through the PIP form. Once I'm finished, we'll jump right through into our live Q&A session, answering the questions that you've been sending us through social media. So let's get started. So first of all, what is PIP? So it stands for Personal Independence Payment, and it can help with some of the extra costs if you have MS. You can make a claim if you're over 16 and below state pension age. There are different rates of PIP, so you could get between £26.90 a week and £172.75 a week. The amount that you get depends on how your MS affects you. To make a new claim, you can call 0800 917 2222. You will then be sent a paper or digital form to fill in. So PIP will assess certain activities that you might do in your daily life. If you have difficulties with daily tasks or moving around, at least 50% of the days of the year, so over half the days of the year, whether this is physical, mental, cognitive, or due to fatigue, you should consider applying. So some examples of activities that PIP assesses include making food, washing and bathing, using the toilet, dressing and undressing, and walking short distances. So when filling in the form, it's helpful to think about things like, do you use any aids? So for example, for washing and bathing, do you use a shower seat? When thinking about walking, PIP is interested in how far you can walk. So thinking about how far that might be. So 20 meters and 50 meters are the kind of key distances that they're talking about, and it can be helpful to think of that in terms of buses. So very roughly 20 meters is 2 buses parked next to each other, and 50 meters is 5 buses parked next to each other. Other things to think about are the actions of the activities. So we'll talk about this a bit more later, but for example, when making food, think about if you can do things like chop and peel vegetables. If you can't, make sure to put that on the form and explain why. Similarly, washing and bathing, think about if you can do things like wash your back. If you can't do that, then make sure to put that on the form. So the Department for Work and Pensions, or DWP, will give you a score for each of these activities. You don't need to score points for every activity to get PIP, but you do need to score at least 8 points in total for either daily living or mobility to be entitled to PIP. And a descriptor can apply to you if MS affects your ability to complete a task at some stage of the day on over half the days of the year. And in deciding this, the timing of the task should be considered and whether you can carry out the task when you need to do it. So for example, if being asked about dressing and undressing, you might be fine getting dressed in the morning, but if you find it difficult to get undressed in the evening, then that can count as a day where you find that difficult. It doesn't have to be the whole day, just some of the day when you would need to do that activity. So as well as thinking about whether you can do something, the DWP should also consider whether you can do it reliably. And they define that in these 4 ways. So safely, so in a way that is unlikely to cause harm either to you or anyone else, either during the activity or afterwards. So for example, with preparing foods, if you frequently, for example, burn yourself when you try and attempt this activity, then make sure to put that on the form. for moving around, if you are quite likely to fall over or trip up when you're walking, then obviously make sure to put that on the form as well. They should also look about whether you can do it to an acceptable standard, and this can include without causing pain or breathlessness. So even if you do an activity, do make sure to put down on the form if this does cause you pain or make you breathless. As well, for acceptable standard, it could be things like if you're preparing food, do you frequently undercook or overcook your food? Because if so, then that could not be to an acceptable standard. And again, it's worth putting that on the form. And then also looking at whether you can do things repeatedly as often as is reasonably required. So, for example, you might be okay to prepare food in the morning, but not be able to do this in the evening due to fatigue. So you need to put that on the form. And then they also look at whether you can do things in a reasonable time period. So it should take you no more than twice as long as someone without MS. So think about maybe timing activities that you do to see how long they take you. So, it might have used to take you 5 minutes to get dressed and now it takes you 20 minutes. Or it might be that you can walk, but it takes you a very long time to, and it's worth sort of timing it, because it could be that if you do walk very slowly, then they can get points. You can get points for that, even if you can walk more than 20 or 50 meters. So yeah, again, it's a good idea to think about the impact doing these tasks would have on you and explain that in your application form. And you may find it helpful to keep a diary of your symptoms. And you can find a diary template on the MS Society website. If you want a bit more detail about the PIP activities, you can go onto this website, pipinfo.net. And if you click on the activities section, you can go through each activity on the PIP form, and it gives you a bit more idea what they're looking for, what the definitions are. The MS Society and Citizens Advice also have helpful online fact sheets on how to fill in the PIP application form, and these do go through each activity in detail, giving examples of things that you might want to put. So thinking about the actual PIP form, so at the beginning of the form, there are a few questions about your personal details and about your medical professionals. Don't worry much about who you put down as your medical professionals. The DWP is unlikely to contact them. So, you could put down your GP or your MS nurse or neurologist, but it doesn't matter too much which ones you choose. And again, don't worry too much about exact dates if you're not sure in terms of how long you've had a health condition or symptoms. You can just put approximate months or years. In terms of approaching the questions about the activities like preparing food, then a general approach, which is quite useful, is to say, I have MS and any other health conditions that you have that are relevant. And that means I have these symptoms, and these symptoms mean that I find this difficult. And as a result, this is what I do. So for preparing food, that might be, I've got MS, and that means that I have numbness in my hands, which means that I'm not able to chop and peel vegetables safely. So as a result of this, I have to buy pre-chopped vegetables, or a friend has to help me prepare food and does all the chopping of the vegetables for me, or I have to buy ready meals. That's just an example of what you could put. So now I just wanted to talk through all of the PIP activities and give you a bit of a flavour of things that might be relevant to you if you've got MS, given the common symptoms that people with MS have. So we've talked quite a lot about preparing and cooking food. So again, thinking about, can you do things like chop and peel vegetables, open tins, stand at a cooker to watch a pan? Think about aids you might need, like a perching stool. Even if you don't have an aid, if you know that you need it, it's helpful to put it down. And if you do get help from people, do make sure to explain that, and obviously explain that you do need that help because of your MS symptoms. For things like eating and drinking, helpful things to think about are some people struggle to use a knife when they're eating. due to numbness in their hands. So make sure to put that down and what you do as a result. So does a partner help you cut up your food on your plate, or do you deliberately buy food that's already been cut up? And for managing your treatments, a thing to think about there is, a lot of people with MS have cognitive impairments, so they might find it difficult to remember to do things like take medications. So do you need somebody to prompt you to take medication? And do you use something like a dose set box to put any pills in to make sure that you remember to take them? And make sure to explain that even if you kind of have reminders like alarms on your phone or to-do lists, if that isn't sufficient, if you do still need someone to remind you, or you'll still forget without a dose set box, then make sure to put that down. So for washing and bathing, things to think about: do you use a shower seat? Do you find it difficult to get in and out of the bath or shower? Do you need grab rails? Do you need somebody to help you get in and out of the bath or shower? And do you need help to wash specific parts of your body? So to help wash your hair, to help wash your feet, or to help wash your back. And also think about whether you do wash and bathe as often as you might want to, or whether fatigue might mean that you only do this 2 or 3 times a week because the fatigue is too much on the other days of the week. And again, that could mean that you can't do it at least 50% of the days of the year. So yeah, now thinking about managing toilet needs or incontinence. So things to think about here are: do you use an aid? So do you need grab rails to help you get on and off the toilet? Do you use incontinence pads? And do you need help from anyone else when using the toilet or to manage incontinence? For dressing and undressing, again, thinking about, do you need help from anyone else to do this activity? So it could be things like putting on shoes or socks, or it could be things like putting on t-shirts or jumpers. And then briefly on some of the other ones, so communicating with other people is more about very kind of short sentences, so kind of 2 or 3 sentences. We're not talking about talking at great length. So when you're communicating with people, does brain fog mean, for example, that if someone says 2 or 3 sentences to you, you will really struggle to understand what that means unless you have somebody else explaining it to you? And similarly, do you struggle to articulate yourself for 2 or 3 sentences without having someone help you do that? Similar for reading and understanding written information. This isn't talking about can you read books or magazines. It's talking about 2 or 3 sentences. So would you really struggle to understand 2 or 3 sentences if you had to read them? And also, if you'd struggle to do that, would you also struggle to understand signs? Mixing with others is looking at things like body language and eye contact. So whether it's not looking about leaving the house to talk to people, it's looking at the kind of theoretical test of, if someone was in front of you, would you be able to maintain sort of good eye contact, body language, have a sort of 5-minute conversation with them okay, or with things like anxiety mean that wasn't possible? In terms of making decisions about money, things to think about are: would you are you able to sort of pay all your bills on time without having someone remind you to do that? Or is it that you would forget to do that, so you need someone else to do it for you? And then you can also get points if brain fog means that it's also really difficult for you to do simple sums. So kind of, if you think about, if you had £10 and you wanted to check if you could get 3 items, and you'd know that those 3 items added together wouldn't cost more than £10. So if you'd really struggle to do that, then make sure you put that on the form as well. So all of those activities are about the daily living section of the form. So you might get 2 points for one, 2 points for another. And if that all adds up to 8, then you'd get the standard rate of the daily living component of PIP. So the last 2 activities, planning a journey or following a route and moving around, are what comprises the mobility section. So planning a journey or following a route is not about physical difficulties you have with going on a journey. They are covered by moving around. So planning a journey or following a route is looking at things like whether you're able to find your way if you go on a familiar or unfamiliar journey. So would you be at quite high risk of getting lost and therefore need to have someone with you? Or would you need to have someone with you due to anxiety? Or would you need to have someone with you due to a visual impairment? And so have a think about, whether you actually don't go on, for example, unfamiliar journeys on your own because you know that you'll get lost or you'll get too anxious. And if that is the case, then try and put some examples on the form. For example, if you needed to attend a doctor's appointment or a hospital appointment and you weren't able to attend because someone was meant to go with you and they weren't able to come in the end. And then for moving around, so I mentioned earlier, they're looking at how far you can walk. So you get 12 points if you can't walk more than 20 meters, so about 2 buses parked next to each other. 8 or 10 points if you can't walk more than 50 meters, so about 5 buses parked next to each other. And 4 points if you can walk between 50 and 200 meters. And obviously 4 points on its own isn't going to be enough to get the standard mobility component of PIP. But as I said earlier, you need to think about whether you can walk distances reliably. So as I say, that includes safely. So if you have recently fallen over whilst walking, then make sure to put that on the form. And, if the speed of your walking is very slow, put that down. If your gait is quite unusual, then you could say, that's not to a reasonable standard. So make sure to put that down on the form. And if you can, for example, you can walk more than 50 meters once a day, but doing that would then mean that you weren't able to walk more than 50 meters for the rest of the day, then you wouldn't be able to do that repeatedly as often as you needed to. So you can say that you can't walk more than 50 meters reliably because you can only do it once a day, for example. And obviously comment as well on even if you can walk further than 50 meters, comment on whether this does cause you pain. So even if walking 20 meters is going to cause you a substantial amount of pain, even if you do choose to walk further than that, then make sure to put that down, because then you could show that you couldn't even walk 20 meters reliably because of the pain that this causes you. So in terms of what to send with your PIP form, obviously, if you've got any letters from neurologists, MS nurses that are talking about your symptoms, then that will obviously be very helpful to back up what you're saying. But it can also be helpful to ask one of your medical professionals, such as MS nurse, neurologist, GP, or physiotherapist, if they could write some supporting medical evidence that specifically does comment on your ability to do the PIP activities. So if they can comment on your ability to do things like prepare foods, wash and bathe, and how far you can walk before you have to stop and rest for a few minutes. If you can't get that evidence, or if you want some additional evidence, then it can help if you've got a carer or a relative or a friend or a partner who cares for you. They could send a supporting letter explaining how they help you. And I mentioned earlier, if you keep a diary of your symptoms, this can be used as evidence. And that's quite helpful if you have fluctuating symptoms and you're not quite sure, for example, whether you need help making an evening meal most days a week or just once or twice a week. If you keep a sort of daily diary for a couple of weeks, then you'll get much more of an idea of whether it's most days that you need help or whether most days you don't need help. And then if you've had a needs assessment from your local council, this usually involves someone coming round to where you live and having a look at whether you might need any aids or adaptations, the things maybe like grab rails or aids like a perching stool. And if they then comment on any aids or help you need at home, then that could be used as evidence that you do need those aids, even if you don't have them. So that's obviously a lot of information. But if you do want some more advice on your own situation and any questions you've got about the PIP form or about the next stages of the PIP claims, that could be PIP assessments, or if you've got the result of the claim but you're not happy with it, then you can also contact us for help with challenging decisions and appeals. And we've got some template letters that you can use as well. So if you want to contact us, you can call the MS helpline on 0808 800 8000, and that is open Monday to Friday, 9 to 7 p.m. And you can ask to speak with a benefits advisor, and then you'll be transferred to us directly. Or if we're not available, you can leave a message on our voicemail and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And we do aim to get back to people within 3 working days. And you can also email us on msbenefitsadvice@dls.org.uk. So now we're going to join James and Alicia to answer some of your questions about PIP. So we'll put the links to all of the information that we just talked about in the comments section, so keep an eye out for that.
Thank you, Julian. And just quickly to let you know that Julian's masterclass and the Q&A that we're about to have, they'll both be available afterwards on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel as well. Now, we know that MS is unpredictable and it's different for everyone. And we also know that PIP assessments often fail to take into account invisible or fluctuating symptoms. And you might be aware that we've recently launched our 10 Years of PIP campaign. And that's to call on the UK government to launch a full review to fix PIP. So please support our campaign and sign our petition. And we'll pop the link in the comments section now. And you may have noticed there are 3 of us here. So as well as Julian, who you've just seen, and myself, James, let me introduce Alicia. Hello, Alicia.
Hi.
Hello there. Thanks for joining us this evening. Very well, thank you. Are you well?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good, good. You've been supporting our 10 Years of PIP campaign and sharing your experience of PIP through that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's quite this campaign is quite important. PIP does need to change. I'm meeting so many people with MS, and everyone's symptoms fluctuate. Everyone's symptoms change, and not everybody's in the same boat. My experience with the PIP assessment wasn't very nice. I had to appeal a decision because I was judged on a 5-minute window, a 10-minute window tops of what my symptoms were, etc. These PIP assessors are not seeing us people with MS on a daily basis, how we are struggling and what it's like to live day to day with the symptoms that we have or the struggles that we just kind of have. So when I appealed my situation, I did go online just to do a little bit of research. I had the support of my MS nurse, my doctor, and my neurologist all wrote support, and my mother wrote all supporting letters to assist, because it cannot just be based on that face-to-face assessment that you see me walking that day and you're making a whole judgment of how I should then get some kind of help. And for everyone I've met a lot of people online who are going through the struggle with people that are too scared to apply for PIP. You can go to the MS Benefit Advisor, Citizens Advice. You can speak to people online. Always contact the MS Society. They will put you in touch with whoever, because you don't need to struggle. You are entitled. You may have a day where you're fine, and then the next day you may be laid up in bed for 2-3 days. Do you know what I mean? Nobody can really understand what you're going through apart from yourself. But there is people out there who can support and who can help. And I did find that kind of support, and I was very thankful that I had a good MS nurse and my doctor. Everyone was quite supportive, but I know that that's not everybody's story.
Thank you, Alicia. That's really interesting. Hopefully, when we're going through some of these questions that we've already received about PIP tonight, you'll be able to maybe share with us where they chime with you and your experience as well, so that you and Julian can both help people to understand going through PIP and the way to get that help. As I say, lots of people have already asked questions. about PIP, and we've had some of those questions in PIP applications and appeals that you just mentioned as well, which I think is quite a common experience, and questions about financial support available generally. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can now. If we don't get through all the questions, then don't worry. After the Q&A, we'll go through the questions and get back to you in the comments. And remember as well, as you mentioned then, Alicia, that people can find all the latest information on the website. That's mssociety.org.uk. And you can also call the helpline. You mentioned that as well, if you need support, or to speak with one of the benefits advisors as well. And again, the details are on our website, mssociety.org.uk. And of course, you can phone the helpline. It's 0808 800 8000. So let's get started with our first question. So this is from someone living in Scotland. They say they were transferred to ADP, which is Adult Disability Payment, from PIP in May. I'm now moving back to England and I was told I have to reapply for PIP. Do I have to go through all the assessments all over again, despite the fact that I was already on it? Seems a bit unfair.
Yeah, so when ADP was introduced, I think it is something we were a bit worried about, because obviously it's great that Scotland has got its own system and they're looking at ways to kind of improve adult disability payment, for example, making the assessments more person-centred and in-house. Mm-hmm. But obviously, if somebody is moving house from England to Scotland, or even just from Scotland to England, then because of the residence rules for ADP, they will have to apply for PIP. You'd hope that if you recently applied for ADP, that you could provide obviously the same evidence that you provided for adult disability payment. And if you had a copy of your form, hopefully you could put similar things down on your PIP form. It's very unusual, but about 5% of people don't have to have a PIP assessment if they have got sufficient medical evidence. So yeah, it's possible that if you have got that, then you wouldn't have to have the assessment. But otherwise, yeah, I think we're just in an unfortunate position, but at least maybe you can use what you wrote on the ADP form and use the same medical evidence if it's quite recent.
Thank you, Julian. Got a question that's just come in tonight. How do you get the higher mobility payments, as they need to get the car that's adapted? They have right side weakness and struggle to drive too far because their foot and leg goes numb. They say they're still waiting for them to review the PIP and been waiting since April.
So yeah, so the main way is via the moving around descriptor. So if you are not able to walk more than 20 meters, or you're not able to do that reliably, then that would give you 12 points, which would then qualify you for the Motability scheme, where you can get an adapted vehicle. If you get 12 points from the planning and following a journey section, or if the combination of the planning and following journey and moving around section comes to 12 points, you could get it that way as well. So for example, if you're not able to go on familiar or unfamiliar journeys on your own, either due to cognitive impairment, meaning that you're very likely to get lost and wouldn't be able to use things like Google Maps or SatNav, and or if you get too anxious to go on journeys on your own, then that could also get you points so that you'd score high enough to get the Motability scheme.
Thank you. Someone else here is interested in finding out about the transfer from PIP to attendance allowance and the implications of that as well. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so there isn't a specific transfer from PIP to attendance allowance. So it is a bit confusing because you can't claim PIP unless you are working age, so under state pension age. However, if you've claimed PIP already and you then reach state pension age, you can continue to get PIP. So attendance allowance is basically PIP for people who are over state pension age. But attendance allowance doesn't include a mobility component. So a lot of people will be likely better off on PIP than on attendance allowance if they're getting the mobility side of PIP.
And just related to that, someone's just put a question in this evening about saying I was awarded PIP for 10 years in 2015. Can I expect a full reassessment in 2025? So
If you are over state pension age, the government has said that they will be light touch reviews every 10 years. So it will probably just be a simple form. If you're under state pension age, it may involve an assessment as well. The sort of 10-year light touch reviews have only kind of just started happening because PIP was only introduced in 2013. So we do still have to wait and see a little bit about what that will look like. But potentially it could either be a kind of a more slimmed down form of assessment that's just based on your form and medical evidence, or it could involve a face-to-face assessment.
We just don't know at the moment, is that?
Yeah, it depends on your age. So as I say, if you're over state pension age, it's much less likely to involve an assessment. But if you're under state pension age, it may well do.
Thank you. This next question that we had in may chime with you, Alicia, a little. You can tell me. The process is dreadful, they say, and when you speak with someone, they instill fear and say if you appeal, you may lose. I'd welcome feedback on how to overcome this. Is there ever any chance of it being completed online, which seems a very old-fashioned way of processing? Everything else is online. That would speed up the process and be helpful for people who have difficulty writing that much. So a couple of things there. One is the online, but the other is just the sort of the feelings as you go to approach the process and instilling fear. They say if you appeal that you might lose. I don't know, Alicia, if you have anything you'd like to say on that before Julian answers.
To whoever's wrote that, you have a medical condition that cannot be denied. It is written in black and white by your neurologist, your doctor, and your MS nurses. It cannot be, that bit cannot be denied. You have MRI scans which are clearly showing that there is something wrong with you. Do you know what I mean? That is all the evidence that should be needed. Once you have gathered all that evidence from those professionals, it cannot be denied. I'm sorry. For an appeal, it shouldn't be denied. You should be okay. Do not get too anxious about it. You are in the right. Do not let none of these PIP assessors or professionals make you feel that you are any less than or that you shouldn't be entitled to anything. You have medical evidence to state that there's something wrong. Do you know what I mean? And that's out of your control, but it also plays a part in as to why you should get it. Do not feel anxious about it. The medical team, your doctors, your neurologists, etc., they are on your side. And don't forget that. Once it is in black and white and on paper, it cannot be denied. You submit all of that. That does the talking for you. So the more you submit, the less you talk.
Thank you, Alicia. That was very useful. Julian, did you want to come in on that about approaching it, but also about whether it could be completed online?
So if you want to challenge a PIP decision, it is a two-stage process. So the first stage, unfortunately, is not yet able to be done online. It's requesting a mandatory reconsideration. So you can do that by phone, by calling PIP, or you can submit a letter or the mandatory reconsideration form. If you contact us, we can send you a template letter you can use to challenge the PIP decision. And then if that's still unsuccessful, then you can do an appeal, and the appeal can be completed online. So there's an online appeal form that you can complete and you can upload evidence there. And, just to echo what Alicia's saying, like it is, particularly if you've not been awarded PIP at all, there is no risk. Obviously if you're challenging a decision not to award you benefit, all that can happen is that, the best outcome is that you will get PIP, and 68% of PIP appeals are successful. So, it's definitely worth doing it. And it can be done online if you are able to use the online form.
Thank you both. Just on that, on appealing, a question's come in just now. Someone saying, my mandatory reconsideration, which is the first part of an appeal, or just before the appeal, as I understand it, my mandatory reconsideration came back with no changes. 1 point out in the first part. I think they mean maybe they were 1 point short to get PIP from the first part. Is it worth going to tribunal, or should I just start another application?
So as I say, if you've not been awarded any PIP, there's no risk to your claim. So the risk is when you already get some PIP, because if they're looking at it again, they can look at everything again. But if you are not currently being awarded PIP, then it's definitely worth going to appeal. As I say, it is a 68% success rate at appeal. And it's just another chance to put your case. And also the first stage, it is where the DWP PIP look at it themselves, whereas when you do the appeal, it's an independent judge that's making a decision. And also, if you do the appeal, you have a bit more time to do things like gather medical evidence, because you only have 30 days to do the mandatory reconsideration once you get the PIP decision. And that's the date on the letter. So you might not get that letter maybe for 2 weeks so then you only have a couple of weeks to do the mandatory reconsideration. So you might not have time to get any new medical evidence. But if you do the appeal, that gives you more time to get medical evidence. It will be a few months before you actually go to tribunal. So it just gives you a bit more time to, as I say, get evidence, maybe get supporting letters from family members or anyone that helps you.
Thanks. And they say in their question, is it worth going to tribunal or just start another application? Am I right in saying they have to go through a tribunal to continue this? They couldn't just apply again?
Yeah, they can apply again. It's up to, so it's sometimes a better idea to apply again if your conditions got quite a bit worse than when you were assessed. Because when you do the appeal, they can only really look at what you were like on around that time of the assessment and what you're expected to be like. But if you've sort of unexpectedly had a deterioration in your condition since then, they're unlikely to look at that. So in that case, a new application might be more likely to succeed. It's worth just having a look at the points to see whether you think you have got a case. Or if you think you're not too sure, but you think you definitely have a case now, then applying and just doing a new application might be a good idea. You could theoretically do both, but you'd have to bear in mind that if the appeal was successful and you got a backdated PIP, that decision would only last up until the date that you did the new application for PIP, and then whatever outcome you got from the new application would be how much PIP you got, if any. So it's an option, but it might be better to just look at whether you think you've changed a lot in terms of your symptoms since when you had your last assessment.
It's really useful, thank you. And Alicia, did you go through the tribunal as part of your appeal? Did you do the full appeal in order to get your successful claim?
Just the second bit, the re-recommendation, is that what it's called? Just that bit, but I feel like I must have submitted enough evidence and then it was overturned because they just said from the get-go, no, I was awarded no PIP at all. Just based off of, I could walk, the semi-walking and things like that. But after I did the second bit and I just submitted all my documents and everything, it was overturned.
Thank you. There's someone asking here about saying that they're very worried about being scrutinised applying for PIP and then thinking that they're not disabled enough. Do either of you have any advice on that? You've touched on it maybe a little already, but any specific advice you say to someone who's thinking, I'm not disabled enough for PIP and I'm going to be scrutinised?
Yeah, I have something to say. When you are applying for such benefits and you have MS, when you are speaking to these assessors, bear in mind and always talk about your worst times with it. Your worst times with your MS, the days that affect you the most, the things that you struggle with. It's the littlest things: getting out of bed, fastening your trousers, tying your shoelace. For me, it's swallowing, like eating and swallowing. You speak about the worst times you have ever come across what you've experienced with your MS. Do not forget to speak about those times, because the day you walk into that assessment, you could be having a good day. It could be sunny outside and you could be having a good day. And when that PIP assessor asks you, are you okay? Naturally, you're going to say, yes, I'm okay. But in reality, yesterday you wasn't okay and tomorrow you may not be. Do not miss out on speaking about how MS has really made you feel and how much your life has actually changed. Think about all those down days. You speak about it all. You do not hold back. You will not be scrutinised. This is your reality. This is your life. Speak about it for people to hear about it. Change needs to happen.
Thank you, Alicia. Julian, do you want to speak to that about presenting? Some people talk about saying, put your worst day, put forward your worst day, explain your worst day. Obviously, it is a fluctuating condition. It's completely unpredictable. Alicia's just said that today, yesterday, things might be different. Have you got any advice that you give to people on how to approach that?
Yeah, so as I said earlier in the PIP Masterclass, what PIP's interested in is what you're like most days. So you don't have to have a difficulty every single day in order to qualify for PIP. It needs to be most days. So it's not really going to be relevant if you either don't find something difficult once a week or you do. If it is most days, that's what's to talk about. And obviously, I can't say, not everyone with MS will qualify for PIP, but some people might score 2 points, some people might score 4, some people might score 6 points, some people might score 8 points and then qualify for PIP. So it's worth having a go if you think you could be entitled. It's not, they've got a very convoluted way of deciding who gets PIP, but it's not about whether you're disabled enough or not. It's just a sort of fairly, it's just that's what they've come up with. But it's definitely worth thinking about if you have difficulties with things like preparing food, washing, dressing, moving short distances. If you do, then, or any of the other activities that we've mentioned earlier, then it is definitely worth applying. But doing things like, as we said, like keeping a diary, so you've got an idea of, okay, actually, I've realised most days I do struggle with preparing food, or I do need help to put on my shoes, or I do need help to get in and out of the shower. Or actually, like 4 days a week, I don't really feel able to go even for a short walk outside. So if that kind of thing is chiming with you, then, it definitely would be worth applying.
Thanks. A very short but direct and I think very, very useful question has come in. How do you prove pain? Because obviously this process is about showing invisible symptoms very often.
I guess, just medical evidence of pain. And obviously, if you keep a diary as well. And I guess also if you have relatives or, people that help you, they might be able to testify as well.
And this idea of having to prove things is obviously how lots of people see this as they go into the process. You've both talked about ways around that. Alicia, I think you've suggested so far that really have your evidence, and that's the way you take some of the strain off yourself, because you're presenting facts to them and you're presenting that evidence. Am I summarising that right?
Correct. That's very correct. The process can be very stressful, and obviously everybody who's got MS will know stress doesn't like us. Some people don't like stress, so it's just that little preparation and with support of doing it. Get the support so they can help you gather up all the information that you need to be prepared when you're applying for PIP. Get your doctors, MS nurses, whoever on standby to say that you may need support in letter. It can just be a very stressful period.
Thank you. Another question that's come in is a question about the whole PIP setup, really. As MS will not get any better, why will they not give PIP for life? Yes, Julian, that's one for you.
So no one really gets PIP for life. 10 years is usually the maximum, and then they do the light touch review after 10 years. It is something that the MS Society and Disability Charities have been campaigning on for similar progressive conditions. But currently it is the case that people do still get reviewed. And so, I guess that's the system that's there, but there is sort of campaigning going on to try and improve it.
Thank you. Someone's asking here, I've got mobility issues. I can't get to my assessment centre, the PIP assessment centre. Can they come to my home? So
particularly since COVID, there are a lot more options for assessments. So telephone, video, face-to-face. But even before lockdown, people could have home assessments. So it's useful to get evidence from your GP or another doctor to say that you wouldn't be able to get to the assessment centre and you do need a home assessment. But equally, they might agree to do a phone assessment or video assessment if you contact them. I understand there is meant to be some flexibility.
And that would be when you first apply. Is that when you would need to have that evidence, or when you'd have to ask for that?
So it would be when, because currently the assessments are done by outside companies, so Capita or IAS. So when they contact you, you could say to them, actually, I need a home visit, here's some evidence, or could I have a phone assessment instead, or a video assessment?
Got it. Thank you. You may have touched upon this or even answered this earlier. I can't remember. How long do you have to appeal your case? I think you talked about how quickly you had to do that first stage.
Yeah, so it's usually it's a month for both stages. So once you get your decision, you've got a month to challenge it, called the mandatory reconsideration. Then they'll send you a letter saying this is a mandatory reconsideration notice. This is our new decision. It might be the same as the old one. Then you've got a month to appeal. But that the month is the sort of the general deadline. If you have good reason for being later than that, then theoretically the deadline for both of them is 13 months. But obviously the longer you delay it, the better your reason is going to have to be for why it's late. When you get your PIP decision, one thing you can do is ask for a full copy of the assessment report, because when you get the decision, it's usually just maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs that explains their decision. But if you want kind of more detail, you can request that. And usually if you request that by phone, then they'll give you like a 2-week extension to do your mandatory reconsideration notice request. It is worth bearing in mind that the PIP helpline is very, very busy at the moment, and people are having to wait up to an hour potentially to talk to someone, and it has been times when not all calls are going through and they're asking people to call back. But yeah, if you are submitting it later than a month, then make sure you have a paragraph in your mandatory reconsideration notice that explains why you're late. So maybe you needed to get some benefits advice, or you were trying to get some medical evidence, or maybe you've been in hospital for 2 weeks, whatever reasons it is that it's delayed, just make sure you put that down. And similarly, when you do the appeal, if it is later than a month, there is a box on the appeal form where you can explain why it's late. And as long as you've got a good reason, it should usually be fine. But obviously, if you're doing it 10 months late, then you are going to need a much better reason than if it's only 2 weeks late.
Thank you. 2 questions. Well, not necessarily looking at each end of age, really, but one is what happens with PIP at retirement age. The other is, can students apply for PIP? I realise older people can be students as well. But so at retirement age, does it stop or carry on? Do I need to keep applying? And can students apply for it at all?
Yeah, so I touched on this earlier when we were talking about the transfer from PIP to attendance allowance. So as I said then, if you get PIP and you are below state pension age, it can continue once you reach state pension age. However, once you have reached state pension age, and if you're not claiming PIP, you can't claim it then. So yeah, it just basically continues, and then you should have a light touch assessment every 10 years.
And as a student, can you apply?
Yes, there's nothing stopping students applying. There's no rules about students. It's just about your symptoms. So yeah, other benefits might be affected by being a student. But for PIP, because it's not means tested, it's just looking at your symptoms and how they affect you. So if you struggle with any of the PIP activities we've talked about, preparing food, washing, dressing, moving short distances, then yeah, you can definitely apply. And
what's the lower age limit on PIP? What's the youngest you can apply?
16.
Right. Thank you. Someone here says, I'm currently going through a tribunal for my PIP. I'm off on maternity leave. What other benefits are there to help me?
So it will depend on your circumstances. So it'll be, without kind of knowing your situation, it'll be quite tricky to say. But if you are on maternity leave from work, then you may well be entitled to statutory maternity pay or contractual maternity pay from your work. So you can obviously check your contract to see if you do get any enhanced maternity pay. then it kind of depends on your situation. So if you're currently getting tax credits or any old legacy benefits like income related ESA, then yeah, we need to kind of do a better off calculation. If you're not getting any other benefits at all, then it might be that universal credit could be a possibility. Universal credit has a capital limit. So if you have over £16,000 savings, then you wouldn't be able to claim universal credit. But universal credit for people that are not already claiming other legacy benefits is the kind of benefit that's there for people who are on low incomes that are, say, struggling to pay their rent or for food and bills. That's their sort of main benefit. There's also council tax support. If you already have children or you just have one, then you can claim child benefit for your children. And then once your child's been born, then there might be other things you can claim if you're getting universal credit as well, like the Sure Start maternity grant. And there's also healthy food vouchers that you might be eligible for to get a voucher to pay for things like fruit and veg and vitamins.
Thank you. And just very, very quickly, because we're nearly out of time, can they apply if they're still capable of working?
Apply for what, sorry?
For PIP.
For PIP. So yeah, lots of people who claim PIP are working full-time, part-time. As we've talked about, it's all about those specific PIP activities. Do you have difficulties with them? So if you do, then you should definitely apply. PIP may ask you about your work and the kind of activities you do at your work, and you might need to explain any discrepancies. They may make some assumptions that are incorrect, like that you have to do lots of walking at your work, and that may not be the case. So if you do work, it might just be worth thinking about any assumptions that might be made and making sure that you explain to them that that isn't the case. You know, if it's a desk job, if you're working from home, if you've had reasonable adjustments at work, to cater to your needs, just bear in mind. And they might ask you about your journey to work as well. Again, they might assume you walk to work, for example, but if that's not the case, obviously let them know. You know, obviously some people use the scheme Access to Work, which can pay for things like taxis to work. So yeah, just bear in mind that although it doesn't stop you getting PIP, some assumptions may be made. So you might want to think about your journey to work and what you do when you're at work.
Got it. Thank you. So as I say, I think we are just about out of time. Thank you very much, Alicia and Julian, for joining us today. I hope you found that useful. I certainly did. I hope everyone at home did as well. I hope we've answered some of your questions about PIP, but if your question hasn't been answered, then we'll respond to all the questions in the comments after this. And of course, you can contact our MS helpline if you want to speak with one of our MS benefits advisors. So that free phone number for that is 0808 800 8000. And of course, details of that and lots more is at mssociety.org.uk/helpline. Or you can look for our information pages as well for any specific queries that haven't been answered. Thank you all very much for joining us and for your questions. Thanks again to Alicia and Julian. Thank you and goodbye.